For almost 40 years, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei stood at the apex of Iran's power structure, blending spiritual authority with hard-edged political control and overseeing a vast network of military influence and economic assets valued in the tens of billions. His rule shaped not only Iran's internal system, but its reach across the Middle East. That era came to an abrupt end during the 2026 joint US-Israeli air campaign, an operation that removed him from power and sent shockwaves through the structure he had built. Stay with us as we uncover the hidden financial networks behind his authority, the geopolitical fault lines they navigated, and the lasting impact left in the wake of his sudden departure. The strike. In the early hours of February 28, 2026, the most ambitious military offensive against Iran in decades unfolded. A coordinated campaign by the United States and Israel struck deep inside Tehran, targeting key military and political leadership. Within hours, Iran's state media confirmed a historic and destabilizing blow. Supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed in the strikes, ending nearly 4 decades of rule and plunging the Islamic Republic into unprecedented turmoil. Khamenei wasn't just a national leader. He was the spiritual and political heart of the Islamic Republic, the architect of Iran's regional strategy, its proxy networks, and its defense architecture. Under his authority, Tehran became a formidable force, challenging US interests and allied states across the Middle East, drawing Iran into proxy wars, nuclear standoffs, and decades of sanctions. The US-Israeli operation, described by officials as a calculated decapitation strike, included hundreds of sorties against military bases, missile sites, and command centers. Multiple senior Iranian figures were also killed, deepening the leadership crisis. Iran declared a 40-day mourning period as tens of thousands of mourners gathered in the capital. Khamenei's death marks a dramatic moment in world history. It removes the longest-serving leader of the Islamic Republic and shakes the foundation of Iran's governance structure, which has blended clerical authority with strategic control over state and quasi-state economic and military institutions. With a transitional council taking temporary charge, Tehran now faces internal power struggles and external retaliation, from missile arsenals to proxy networks across the region. This sudden shift reverberates far beyond Iran's borders, reshaping regional geopolitics, military calculations, and global oil markets, and setting the stage for a new chapter in Middle East conflict where the true cost of strategy and sovereignty will be revealed. Khamenei didn't operate like a billionaire with offshore accounts and visible holdings. His leverage wasn't parked in hedge funds. It was embedded inside the state itself. Economic control in Iran wasn't separate from ideology. It was the backbone of it. Energy routes, defense budgets, sanctioned trade channels, state-linked foundations, all of it reinforced a system where political authority and capital were indistinguishable. The strategy was simple: control the flow of money, and you control loyalty, stability, and long-term survival. That framework shaped everything from nuclear positioning to regional alliances. It allowed Tehran to project influence beyond its borders while cushioning internal pressure through patronage networks. But it also concentrated power heavily at the top. When the 2026 air campaign abruptly removed him from leadership, the shock wasn't symbolic, it was structural. Markets reacted, oil prices surged, regional actors recalculated. Because the system he built wasn't just ideological, it was financial architecture. To understand the scale of that architecture, you have to look beneath official budgets. Large charitable foundations with sweeping exemptions controlled massive industrial and property portfolios. Military-linked enterprises expanded into telecom, construction, and energy logistics. Revenues from sanctioned trade and petroleum distribution circulated through semi-state channels that operated beyond public transparency. This wasn't accidental overlap. It was design, a closed loop where religious legitimacy, economic power, and security institutions reinforced one another. Now the central figure is gone, but the machinery remains. The real question isn't what he owned personally. It's who inherits control of the networks he consolidated. Does the system decentralize? Does it fracture? Or does it tighten under new management? What happens next won't just shape Iran. It will shape regional stability, energy markets, and the balance of power across the Middle East. Behind the language of religion and official policy operated an economic web so extensive that some independent analysts estimated it, along with aligned institutions, influenced up to half of Iran's GDP. This ecosystem spanned formal industries, energy exports, and opaque commercial channels that rarely appeared in conventional reporting. Central to it were the powerful charitable foundations known as bonyads, tax-exempt entities that evolved into major commercial players. Foundations such as the Mostazafan Foundation, often valued in the tens of billions, held stakes across manufacturing, transportation, energy, real estate, and consumer goods. Though framed as philanthropic, many operated under direct oversight of the Supreme Leader's office, forming a parallel economic engine intertwined with state authority. Running alongside these foundations was the vast economic footprint of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Originally formed as a security force, the IRGC expanded into construction, telecommunications, oil services, and infrastructure. Independent estimates have suggested that, when formal holdings and informal networks are combined, IRGC-linked entities influence a significant share of the national economy. Major contracts, control of strategic transport corridors, port facilities, and energy logistics created steady revenue streams that strengthened both security institutions and political leverage. This structure blurred distinctions between public governance and commercial enterprise, making oversight difficult and competition limited. The oil sector became a critical pillar of this system. Reports in recent years indicated that IRGC-linked channels played a major role in managing portions of Iran's export activity, often routing shipments through intermediaries to navigate sanctions pressure. Revenue generated outside traditional budgetary pathways helped reinforce domestic security structures and sustain external relationships. These financial flows were not simply economic tools. They were strategic instruments designed to preserve influence and resilience in the face of international constraints. The result was a financial architecture where ideology, state authority, and capital reinforced one another. That same logic extended beyond Iran's borders. Rather than relying solely on conventional military expansion, Tehran invested in networks of aligned groups across the region. Organizations such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza became central pillars of this approach. Public estimates have suggested that Hezbollah historically received hundreds of millions annually in funding and material assistance, while support for Palestinian factions also reached substantial levels during periods of heightened tension. Since 2012, analysts have estimated that Iran allocated billions of dollars to regional partnerships, including groups in Iraq and Syria. These investments extended beyond armed capacity into social programs and reconstruction efforts, strengthening local legitimacy while advancing broader strategic goals. This model created influence without direct large-scale deployment of regular forces. By channeling economic support through aligned actors, Tehran amplified its regional reach at comparatively lower cost. Yet such arrangements also carried limits. Some allied groups maintained operational independence, occasionally pursuing priorities not perfectly aligned with Tehran's objectives. Even so, the combination of economic patronage and indirect security leverage became a defining feature of the system built under Khamenei, a structure where finance, ideology, and regional strategy functioned as one integrated framework. For nearly 4 decades, Khamenei didn't just lead Iran, he ran it like a sovereign enterprise. The foundations under his command, the paramilitary economic wings, the state-linked conglomerates, these weren't political instruments alone. They were a diversified portfolio, dominating industries from energy and construction to the clandestine trading routes that quietly bankrolled Iran's regional ambitions. The line between state revenue and shadow capital had long since dissolved. When Western sanctions choked off Iran's formal oil markets, the regime didn't collapse. It adapted. What emerged was the shadow fleet, a rotating network of tankers, shell companies, and intermediary buyers moving hundreds of millions of dollars worth of crude through routes deliberately designed to be invisible. Every barrel sold through that system was more than a commodity. It was the financial oxygen keeping Iran's military apparatus, security forces, and proxy alliances alive. Washington spent years targeting these maritime pipelines. They slowed them. They never stopped them. But the nuclear program was the real lever, not as a weapon, as a negotiating instrument. Khamenei understood that the credible threat of nuclear capability was worth more at the table than almost anything else Iran possessed. It was the asset that no sanction could touch, the card that kept adversaries calculating rather than acting. He had converted economic pressure into strategic endurance, and for a long time, it worked. Then came February 2026. The strike that killed him didn't just remove a leader. It cracked the architecture of a system built to outlast any single point of failure. Markets moved, allies recalibrated, and the billions locked inside Iran's web of shadow revenues, proxy commitments, and strategic entanglements were suddenly without the one man who knew exactly how all of it connected. That kind of capital doesn't disappear with its architect. It becomes ungoverned. And ungoverned money in an unstable region is one of the most dangerous forces on Earth. What this story ultimately reveals has little to do with one man's death. The machinery Khamenei built, the shadow revenues, the IRGC-linked industries, the proxy networks sustained by covert oil flows, did not depend on his survival. It was designed to outlast him. And in that design lies the real lesson. At the highest levels of geopolitical power, capital is never just wealth. It is infrastructure. It is the scaffolding that holds influence upright long after the architect is gone. The second lesson is harder to see, but equally important. The elites who endure crises are rarely the ones who react to them. They are the ones who spent years quietly positioning, diversifying control across sectors, embedding themselves inside institutions, building redundancy into every layer of power before the pressure arrived. Khamenei did exactly that. So do many of the figures now watching his fall and drawing their own conclusions. That is what makes this more than a Middle Eastern story. Across Asia, across sovereign wealth corridors and state-linked conglomerates, the same logic is at work. Money deployed not for consumption, but for permanence. The game is always longer than it appears. If you found this valuable, like this video, and subscribe to Zenith for more. In Part 2, we'll examine another figure whose wealth quietly reshapes global strategy, and whose story raises the same unsettling questions about power, survival, and what empires look like when they have no name.